Rev it up and welcome to Cars Yeah, show number 2515. Today we're going to take a journey into the life of the legendary champion, AJ Foyt. Be prepared to be inspired.
This is Cars Yeah, where you'll enjoy interviews with inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Mark Green is here to provide you with a fuel injection of automotive inspiration. So get in, sit down, buckle up, and get ready for a wild ride here on Cars Yeah.
Hello, inspiring automotive enthusiasts, and welcome to Cars Yeah. Today I'm just a little bit south of where I live. I'm in Olympia, Washington, with a very special guest by the name of Art Garner. Art, welcome to Cars Yeah. Do you have any gear, and are you ready to release the clutch?
Oh, yeah, let's go.
All right, we're going to have some fun today talking about a legend in the racing world. But before we start and I give you an introduction, I always like to ask my guests this question. What's one little thing that people may not know about you, Art?
Oh, I guess I actually tried my hand at racing back in the mid-'70s. It was a short career, so I don't talk much about it.
Well,
but,
what kind of racing did you do?
I had a Mustang that I raced in the showroom stock category, which was a big new thing at SCCA back then.
Yeah.
You know, I won a race at Nelson Ledges in Ohio. I had a couple of podium finishes, and then I rolled it up into a little ball. And I raced at Waterford Raceway outside Detroit. Pouring rain, got sideways, hit the dirt, and just started rolling. And that ended my career. But
yeah.
I already knew I wasn't going to be an AJ Foyt at that point.
Well, also that kind of racing when you're funding it all yourself and you can't go back to the pits and say, well, we need a new car. That makes things a little different too, right?
Yeah, I had to go back and tell my wife, we need a new car. And that didn't work too well.
Yeah. I've been there, done that. I raced vintage cars for a while. And luckily, I had a couple of very minor incidents, never rolled a ball up. However, I remember coming back from a weekend at Sears Point with 2 race cars and 2 blown up engines. And that was, dear, maybe we're not going to Hawaii this year or next year.
Yeah. Ouch.
Yeah, it gets expensive, that's for sure, but it sure is fun. Well, let me give you a little introduction. We're going to dive into a very, very cool book that you've written. Art Garner is an award-winning author and finalist for the prestigious ESPN Award for Literary Sports writing for his best-selling book, Black Noon, the year they stopped the Indy 500. For over 40 years, he worked for Ford, Toyota, Lexus, and Honda before retiring in 2014 to finish that first book. That book is about the tragic 1964 race that was stopped by a fiery incident in the second laps, as you recall, resulting in the deaths of drivers Eddie Sachs and Dave MacDonald. I've actually had Dave's son, who sadly we recently lost to cancer, as a guest on this show several years ago. He spoke a lot about that book, by the way. Mm-hmm. He also co-wrote a book titled Indy 500 Memoirs and another Hood to Coast Memories about the relay running race from Mount Hood to the coast of Oregon. Art is the author of a new biography, AJ Foyt, Survivor, Champion, a Legend, that's just been released by our friends at Octane Press. He's been working on the Foyt bio for the past 5 years. You'll understand why it took so long in just a moment. And this is just volume 1, which covers AJ's career through 1977. Volume 2 is expected in May of 2026. So something for us to look forward to once we finish reading this massive book that you've written. We'll be back in just a minute, but first a word from our sponsors, so give them a little love, and we'll be right back. Buckle up. For several years now, you've heard me talk about Linkage Magazine. I've been a subscriber since the start. Their talented and creative team brings you a spectacular publication and website that shares the automotive passion from a worldwide perspective. Linkage is about driving, restoring, collecting, and first-hand experience at collector car auctions and more. They bring you real-world values plus rational, experienced opinions on the current markets. They cover the automotive world and the people who share our passions. And Linkage Magazine has grown, mailing you 6 issues annually. Join me on this journey with Linkage. They're geared for the automotive life. You can subscribe at linkagemag.com. I'm honored to say that my charity of choice here at Cars Yeah is Tech Force Foundation. They help young people find an education and career that aligns with their passions. For those who love cars, problem solving, and working with their hands, a career as a professional automotive technician is the perfect fit for a fulfilling life. We're all wired differently, and not every successful career demands a four-year university. Technical education and the skilled trades matter, and we need qualified, skilled technicians to keep our vehicles rolling. Learn more about how you can support tomorrow's driving force and workforce of technicians at techforce.org, like I do here at Cars Yeah! So, Art, before we get into this book, you had a career in the automotive world. Could you tell us a little bit about what you did for all these different brands, and then retiring and then saying, you know what, sitting around's a little boring. I think I'll write a little book or two. Oh, my goodness. But maybe you can give us a little bit of a background on you first.
Sure. I graduated from Michigan State with a degree in journalism, went to work on a newspaper. Went from there to Ford, where I worked on the employee newspaper, which was, went out to all the retirees, millions of subscribers. It's long since gone, like most newspapers. And then I kind of moved into public relations. Went out west to Toyota, worked at Lexus. And as, over the years, as I took on more management responsibilities in public relations, I wrote a lot less, which I really like to do. So I would start writing what I thought would be a good book, start a book. And I found out starting them was a lot easier than finishing them. I probably have a dozen books that I started and, pound out 50 pages or so. But I had never finished one at that point anyways.
Yeah, I've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of authors on this show, and I hear that. My son's in the middle of writing his first book, and he's one of these guys that, like my wife and my daughter, they just devour books. And he said, this is a lot harder than I thought. And I said, well, keep writing. That's all you can do is, all the authors I've had on the show just said, you got to sit down and just hammer it out. Work on it a little bit every day, or a lot every day. Eventually you get it done. Well, that book I mentioned in your intro, I've got a copy of that on my shelf. And like I said, I had the late Dave MacDonald's son as a guest on the show, got to know him through Superformance. And then sadly, again, we lost him not too long ago from cancer. Mm-hmm. But wonderful book. I have to get my hands on your other books. The one about the running in Oregon, but I do have the Indy memoirs book as well. So a couple of yours sit on my shelf. And this one, I think I'm going to need a bigger shelf because this book is 600 pages. Oh my gosh. So let's dive into what you learned about AJ. First and foremost, when you started this project, did you have any idea how big this could get?
Well, yeah, I knew what a career AJ had over the years. So I knew there was going to be a lot there. But, there were some mainstream publishers that were interested in the book, but they were saying, 75,000 words. This volume 1 is over 600,000 words.
Oh
so you can see,
yeah.
I knew then that, no, that wasn't going to work. I needed somebody who really understood who AJ was and was willing to make a commitment to what was going to be a large book. And at the time, I thought 350,000 would probably cover it. Obviously, I've doubled it just in volume 1. But there's and when we were looking at it, I asked them, what is there to cut out? I asked several of my friends in the writing business, what should we cut out?
Yeah.
And the main response was, a little bit here, a little bit there, but there was not 100,000 words that we could take out. And that's when we decided to do the 2 volumes there.
Yeah. Well, Octane is a great choice. There's a couple publishers that I work with that would be a great choice for this, but Octane definitely is because they understand racing. They understand people. And, many still consider AJ Foyt to be one of the greatest race car drivers of all time. And I think for a lot of people with generations, he's just been around forever. And I was kind of chuckling because when I think of AJ Foyt, I've never met the man, but I've certainly read a lot about him and heard a lot about him, is that he had a bit of a fiery disposition, kind of a bare-knuckle fighter, if you will. And I think I read in one of the write-ups about your book is one reporter said AJ stood for another jerk. He was quite a character, right?
Absolutely. He was the most politically incorrect driver and proud of it. He didn't try to hide anything. He could be, His dad famously said, sometimes working with AJ can be like dancing with a buzzsaw. He could be one real son of a gun. Absolutely. Now, he's mellowed quite a bit over the years. The times I've been talking to him and things like that, he was very cooperative. And a lot of the book has stories about him when he wasn't so cooperative. But he was also night and day. He could be the most agreeable guy in the world. And a lot of journalists will note that. And then an hour later, I mean, he is completely turned around and you just can't work with him, can't deal with him.
Yeah, he's a good old boy from Texas, if I recall. That's where he was born, right?
That's correct. And Houston still lives there.
Still, same place, yeah. And he's married Lucy. I think they got married in the mid-50s, and he's now almost 90, right?
Correct. He'll be 90 in January, this coming January. Lucy passed away last year. Yes. But they married in secret back in 1955, I think it was. She was 17. He was 21. And they got married secretly. It didn't last long. The secret didn't last long. But she wanted to finish high school before it was announced.
Yeah.
And she was a wonderful woman. You know, everybody you talk to says what an angel she was to put up with AJ for all those years. And she also ran the household. That was pretty apparent, too. When she was around, she was the boss.
Of course. Yeah. You got to have it at some point in time. Kind of sounds like my grandparents are from Texas and my grandfather married my grandmother. I think she was 15. And they ended up having 5 kids and they were married for 70 years. And, but yeah, she definitely ran the house. He was a tough farmer and a rancher, but she ran the house. Mario Andretti wrote the foreword to this book. And did you have a chance, I know you spoke to a lot of people and we'll get into that in a minute, a chance to talk a bit to Mario about his opinions on AJ and what were they?
Mario was great. I talked to him 3 different times for this book and I've interviewed him for Black Noon and a couple others and for Memories. And he was great. Very agreeable, very honest, very open. When AJ heard that Mario had agreed to do the foreword, he was a little hesitant about it, but when he saw it, when he read the foreword, he was very appreciative of it. And as Mario says, at one time they were great competitors. Probably didn't like each other at times, but that's all in the past. And now they're BFFs, best friends forever. And Mario really feels that way, and I think AJ does too.
You did, I guess, what I would say, tireless research. And many, many hours interviewing a lot of different people that know AJ. I'm going to run through a couple names here. Obviously, we mentioned Mario Andretti, Roger Penske, the king here, Al Unser Sr., Johnny Rutherford, Jackie Stewart, Richard Petty, Cale Yarborough, and many, many others. As you talk to all these people about AJ at this point in time, maybe some, like you said, would go back and say, man, he was one tough son of a gun to compete with. Was there an overall attitude about who he was from everybody looking back now where, sometimes when you can look back and say, okay, I kind of get who the guy was. Was there a theme that kind of ran through all these different people's lives about their relationship with AJ?
Yeah, I think first and foremost was respect for what he accomplished and what he did on the racetrack. And so many drivers had stories, and this would be some of the, not younger anymore, but younger at the time drivers like Danny Sullivan and Rick Mears talked about when they first came up, that they were treated with respect by AJ on the track. And at that point, AJ was already king. What their relationship was with him and how they had to prove themselves and how, they got to be friendly with AJ over the years. But respect, I think, was the overwhelming feeling I got from virtually everybody I've talked with. Not everybody liked him all that much, but there was just total respect.
He was the first driver to win the Indianapolis 500 4 times, still holds IndyCar records for most victories and championships. As I learned in your book, he was the only driver to ever win the Indianapolis 500, 24-hour Le Mans, and the Daytona 500, which is a bit of what I would call the Triple Crown in racing. He was also won the International Race of Champions in 1976 and 77, and still holds the world closed course speed record he set in 1987. When somebody's been around this long, and you're writing a book about all their accolades, all their successes. Were there things that you uncovered that kind of tipped you back on your heels and went, oh my gosh, how did this guy do all this?
All the time I was coming across things that I wasn't aware of. And you start putting two and two together, and you know what four is going to be down the line, but you realize these things happened years earlier and how that contributed to what's going to happen. Probably the one story was something that didn't happen. There's a famous tale of how AJ has this terrible crash at Riverside in a stock car, is pretty much knocked out, and that the first people who arrive at the crash say, hey, the driver's dead. Don't worry about it. And that Parnelli Jones spots some movement in the cockpit and climbs in and cleans AJ's mouth out and revives him.
Oh, my gosh.
Well,
wow.
That never happened. That didn't happen.
Okay.
And when Parnelli Jones says that didn't happen, that's an indication. That's a pretty good source. But the story has become legend over the years. And nobody seems to know how, nobody seems to know why. But when I first started researching that particular crash, that event, and realized that none of the stories from the day had said anything about Parnelli Jones, that's when I started wondering, hey, did this really happen? And sure enough, Parnelli says, no, it didn't. So that was one story that I think a lot of AJ Foyt fans are going to be surprised that it never really happened.
Well, a lot of people look at AJ, for the last several decades as a team owner, running teams and so forth. But he was an amazing driver, obviously, when we talk about the things I just mentioned that he won in championships. And I read where he actually did his first race when he was 5 years old. Is that true?
Yeah, his first match race against a track champion took place when he was 5 years old. He had a little, midget-looking car that he would take. His dad was a driver, and he would run this around the track between heat races at the local dirt tracks, kind of keep the fans entertained. The world's youngest race car driver. And one of the promoters set up a race between him and the track champion at that point. Just an exhibition race. And part of the Foyt lore is that he beat this guy, beat the track champion. And, the champion now says, years later would say, well, I don't quite remember him beating me. More like, I let the kid win. But AJ believes he won fair and square. And most importantly, his dad, AJ's father, who he worshiped, AJ's father felt the same way.
Yeah. We're going to talk about his dad a little bit and the relationship he had with him. You mentioned that AJ liked to say that I'm just AJ. I'm not any different than any other man, but I don't think that could be further from the truth. As you uncovered all this and peeled back the onion of his life, it seems like he's a massively complex and intricate personality.
Yeah, I mentioned that in the book. He says that all the time. I'm just AJ. You ask what his legacy is going to be, and he says, I'm just AJ, and just like anybody else. But like I say, he was night and day different at times. One of the most interesting people in all of sports, I think. I'm probably a little prejudiced here, having just done the book, but really entertaining, amazing human being to research like I've had an opportunity to do. Just incredible.
Now, obviously, well, not obviously, but lots of times when people age, they do mellow out a little bit. And being able to spend time with him and learn about him now, would you say after that comment I just made that he is a humble guy?
No.
I set you up for that one.
It's just got an ego, as most very successful people do, I think. He still has an ego. He still wants to be the best. And that's what has always driven him. It's an unusual situation where he wants to be recognized at the best, but at the same time is kind of shy and bashful when it actually happens. But if he's not recognized as among the best, that still bothers him, or would still bother him.
Just a little bit. Well, you mentioned a relationship he had with his father. I believe in your book you talk about he calls him Daddy still. I mean,
Yes.
or he did. He's obviously not with us anymore. But Anthony Joseph, or Tony Foyt Sr., he was a racer. I didn't realize that. I always just thought of AJ, but never really thought much about his parents. But what was the relationship he had with his father? Obviously, his father pushed him and drove hard. He was a driver, so he probably looked up to his dad and wanted to be a race car driver like his dad. But what was that relationship like? You mentioned dancing with a buzzsaw.
Yeah, from the very start, his dad was a mechanic at kept the trucks running for a coffee company in Houston. And he had a garage out back of his house that he worked on race cars for the local, or just regular passenger cars. But he also had a couple of midget race cars out back. And, at a very young age, for instance, that was his first memories, was sitting there in his dad's garage while other drivers and racers were there and just watching them banter back and forth. And that's where he got the racing bug. And, like I say, his dad, he didn't have the money or the time to really have a first-rate race car. But by all indications, he was a first-rate mechanic. And over the years, as AJ moved on to Indy cars and that, his dad came with him and worked on the cars and was really probably the only person who could stand up to AJ and tell him to knock it off. And it was an era of tough love. There were no participation trophies handed out in those days. And AJ's main goal was to impress his dad. And there's one story at the end, after AJ has won his fourth Indy 500, they're having a victory celebration up in their suite outside Turn 2 there in Indianapolis. And Tony Foyt, AJ's dad, is going around telling all the crew members thanks for all their efforts and everything they've done. And finally, AJ goes, "Hey, Dad, what about me? What do you think? How did I do?" And, Tony goes, "Well, you've done fair."
Oh my gosh!
And AJ says that's the nicest thing he ever said about me.
Wow.
Now there's an indication that Tony was probably kidding a little bit there too, but still, AJ said that's the nicest thing he ever said about me.
Tough love, for sure. Yeah.
Tough love, absolutely.
Yeah, push and push. Yeah, I like to ask my guests about what I call our inspirational people or mentors in their lives. Let's stay on the path here with AJ. If you think about what you've learned about him, having met him and written so much about him, and as you continue to write about him, what would you say was the most inspirational thing about AJ Foyt, in your opinion?
Just his doggedness, I guess. People think AJ was a great driver right from the start, but he wasn't. He struggled a great deal in the mid-50s when he went on tried to get on the national stage. He won a couple of races early on and then kind of faded into a mid-pack racer. He ran a series of races in Florida, didn't do very well, had to call his mom for gas money to get home. Mm-hmm. She rolls up pennies and sends him $50 worth of penny rolls.
Oh my gosh.
So he can get home. There's another great story that Lucy tells. They were in Detroit. This would have been 56, 57 time period, probably 56. And AJ fails to qualify for the race. And they've got no money. They've got a young son, AJ the third, or Tony, they called them. So they have to literally drive straight through home with virtually no food. They get some milk and a hamburger for little Tony to eat. And on the way home, they decide that, all right, Lucy says, "I'm going to stay home and raise the kids. You need to go out and race. That's where we're going to live from now on. We can't keep on like this." Lucy's mom signs a loan so AJ can get a newer car, and he starts winning some races. And but it took several years for him to really break through. And even when he got to Indy cars, it was a couple years before he won a race. So he was just determined and driven, I guess is the best word, to be a winner. And his dad was the main inspiration, I'm sure, in his life to do that.
Well, it sounds like he lived the life that I've heard from literally every race car driver I've interviewed on this show. Never, ever, ever give up. And he certainly didn't. When you talk about challenges, was there I mean, racing is just a constant flux of challenges, but was there maybe just one story you can share you've learned about him that was a huge challenge in his life that maybe even might have set him on a different course than racing? Or was that not an option?
Yeah, I'm not sure there's one event, but, part of the headline is Survivor Champion Legend. And he came up in an era where guys were getting killed all the time. Dan Gurney said it was, you had to have a World War II mentality. You were going to get it sooner or later. And he and others were able to steel themselves to that, the risk. And were able to keep going when their friends, AJ's mentor was killed on the first lap of his first Indy 500. And he said, well, we're going around on the caution laps, and when I'm driving by that car and it's burned out, and he's still in the car, I wondered if I was cut out for this. I wonder if I could do this. And somehow he did continue. And it was a couple of years, like I said, before he won. But as Parnelli Jones said, hey, I had a lot of determination, probably more than almost anybody else, but not more than Foyt. So that's probably the main thing. He was determined and driven to be successful.
Yeah, amazing time for sure. I like to ask my guests about one special vehicle in their life, but again, we're going to stay on course here with AJ. In learning what you've learned about him, at least in this first book, up to 77, if I asked AJ about the one special race car, do you think there's one that he would want to talk about that? Maybe the first Indy race car, or I don't know. You tell me.
And it changes. One of the challenges in doing this book is AJ's stories will change somewhat over the years. Mm-hmm. And over the years, he's had 4 or 5 of favorite race cars. But I think the one he keeps coming back to the most is the one he drove in 1977 when he won his 4th 500. That was a car that he built. It had a Foyt engine that he built, or it was an old Ford engine that he'd updated. And his dad was a crew chief. So it was his car, his engine, and his dad was a crew chief, and he drove it. And I'm pretty sure that's his favorite. I know that's his favorite.
Wow. Yeah, hard to pick, given a life and career that he's had. I want to ask you a question about you here. If you were reincarnated as a vehicle, that is not what you want to be, but as you perceive yourself, as you've evolved into being a great writer, author of these wonderful books, what kind of car would you be, but why?
When I was working in the industry, I got to drive the newest and the best products from my companies, from the competition, almost every day, a new car.
Fun.
But for me, I had a Ford Ranger. When I retired, I got a Ford Ranger, an old Ford Ranger that I took off the hands of my godson because he was going to New York City. And, it was by no means flashy. Not everything worked. It was dependable, but versatile, low maintenance. Probably not very flamboyant, but that's probably me. Boy, my wife called it a death trap. My granddaughters wouldn't ride it, but I drove it till earlier this year, and I still miss it. That was probably me more than anything else, I guess.
Well, there you go. Nice, honest answer to that question. Well, of course, I always ask my guests about great books, and I'm going to list several of your books on your show notes page, but today it's AJ Foyt, Survivor, Champion, and a Legend by our guest today, Art Garner, and published by our friends at Octane Press. I like to take my guests on what I call the ultimate drive. And again, I'm going to twist this into an AJ thing here. If you could go for an ultimate drive with AJ Foyt, what car would you guys be in? Where would you go? Would you be driving or would he be driving?
Well, I'll tell you, I had a great drive with AJ. We went out to lunch, and he's got the biggest Suburban you've ever seen in your life. I know they only come one size, but it seemed huge. And we went to one of his local favorite lunch spots near his shop in Waller, Texas, which is outside Houston. And afterward, he said he wanted to check on some of his ranches. He owns a number of ranches in the area around his shop. And for a couple hours, we just drove around the countryside and we talked about all sorts of stuff, about his ranches, and he'd done this and he'd done that, and he used to own this place, but he'd sold it, and, about his philosophies. He never liked to borrow money because he didn't want somebody else to have to pay it back if something happened to him. And I saw, and just in that drive, I saw both sides of AJ. We went to one of his ranches, and there was a cow that had just given birth, and the calf was standing right next to the cow, but the cow wouldn't get up. And so AJ's talking with a couple of ranch hands about how we need to, get this cow back on its feet and move it around a little bit. Very concerned about that. And then we come across one of his horses that had somehow gotten out of the corral. It was out on the street. So we get out, and we finally corral that horse. And then he finds the ranch hand that he thought was responsible, and he just slayed into him. So, you got to see all
the sides
of AJ there. Yeah. But, very caring, very concerned, and then very upset when somebody he thought hadn't done their job.
I don't think I'd want to have AJ upset at me. That's for sure. Yeah.
But, I told him if I didn't piss you off writing this, I probably haven't done a very good job. And, he never really I could tell he was tired of answering my questions a couple different times. But for the most part, he never yelled at me. I know that.
Well, that must have been fun for you once in a while, and I've had this happen to me, where you end up with somebody that's bigger than life and you get to spend some real time with them. And other than just sitting and talking, but you get to do something with them. And that must have been something. You walk away from that day pinching yourself saying, how did I get here? Holy cow.
Absolutely. And, a lot of this took place during COVID. So I was stuck at home. A lot of people were stuck at home. And a lot of the interviews, guys like Al Unser, who had a reputation of not being the most talkative guy. I spent 2 hours with him on the phone. He just kept going and going and going. And I think it was people were at home with nothing to do and looking to talk with people.
Right.
So, I was fortunate at that part to talk to so many drivers like that, greats of the sport, and Rick Mears, Al Unser, Mario Andretti, all those folks, they had all the time in the world. And that was special and probably couldn't have happened in a different time.
Exactly. Well, this book is absolutely fantastic. And is the book out now?
It is, yes.
Yeah,
it's
awesome.
It's available through Octane now. They are shipping books. Amazon is taking orders. I'm not sure but by October 1st, they'll be shipping books too.
Well, since this show, and we'll edit this part out, will air mid-October, we'll all be set to go. So that'll be cool. Well, listeners, I would encourage you to get your hands on this book. And I always say this, if you have an automotive friend, an inspiring automotive enthusiast, it's really hard to shop for. Books like this are wonderful things to give as gifts with the holiday season coming up, because they stay in the person's life. They can go back to them and refer to them. And with 600 pages, that should keep somebody busy. For sure. And with the second book coming next year or the year after, we'll see where you get with this book. They'll have some fun with that too. Could you leave us with some parting words of wisdom or advice, maybe something that you learned from AJ in all your investigation of writing this book?
Well, I talked a bit about the determination, the drive he had. And while I'm writing this book, I was also trying to read a number of biographies. And Robert Cairo is a writer who's done a number of biographies, pretty famous, and he had a theme that said, turn every page. Basically, turn every page of your research. Keep going. There is no end in sight. Keep going. Keep turning those research pages. And I tried to do that. And obviously at that length, that many pages, I've looked at a lot of stuff on AJ. And I also have learned to have, so much respect for people who write biographies and do books for a living. It was hard enough on me. I don't know if I had to do this for a living, I couldn't do it. But So the people who do it for a living, I have tremendous respect for.
It's a pretty good way to say. Do you think at this point there's some pages you didn't get to turn with AJ that you wish you had?
You know, just like with Black Noon, there's all these things when I come across and I go, I can't believe I didn't know that. Or, you know, or a little something that would have added to a bigger story that is in the book, but just a little nuance or something that would have made it even better. You know, you're always going to come across something like that, and you know, you do your best when you can, and you know, go with it from there.
Well, at some point, like many authors have said, you have to finish the book. So
yeah,
and that always leaves the door open for something else, which of course the second volume will be coming out for us to enjoy. Is there a way for people to follow along with you, Art, or stay in touch with you?
You know, I've got a Facebook page, Books by Art Garner. I think it's the title. I'm on Twitter at Art P. Garner, LinkedIn. I've got something called a Substack, which I've just kind of started. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a little longer. It's a little longer version of Twitter, and so you can, you know, go into greater detail and depth on something.
Oh yeah, I follow a couple Substack writers, and some great things. I've had some guests on the show also that do Substack writing. So a great way to keep honing your skills. I want to do a shout out. Thank you to Joanna Snyder at Octane Press. She's brought some great guests here, and this is another one. So Joe, thank you very much. Art, hey, thanks for taking a pit stop with us today and sharing this new book. Absolutely fantastic. Like I said, I need to build a heavier duty shelf for this one. But I'm so happy to have it as part of my library. We look forward to the second one. Until you and I talk again, my friend, I'll see you down the road.
Thanks, Mark. I really enjoyed it.
Lots of fun. Are you ready to take charge of your financial future? Then let me introduce you to Capitalize Your Finances. It's an online course designed to empower you with the knowledge and tools for mastering your money. This course will help you lay out the ins and outs of budgeting, the importance of emergency funds, investing strategies, and how to plan for a secure retirement. All this presented by financial planner Chris Paniotu. Chris has developed this course to help you effectively navigate your world of finance with confidence. Stop stressing about money and start taking control. Enroll in Capitalize Your Finance online course today and pave your way to financial success. To learn more, go to capitalizepodcast.com/courses, or better yet, go to the Cars Yeah website, show notes page for today's show, and click on the link under Capitalize Your Finances. You'll be glad you did. Do it today.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's ride here at Cars Yeah. Drive on over to carsyeah.com to find show notes and inspiring automotive fun. Download your free copy of Filler Up, a fun book filled with gorgeous photographs of fuel filler fun, including quotes from more inspiring automotive enthusiasts. Download your copy today, and we'll see you next time on Cars Yeah.